We all think we know the story of the first flight. But what if I told you the history we all celebrate was actually shaped by a really bitter feud, an exiled invention, and a forgotten genius whose greatest work had nothing to do with flying at all? Here it is. This is the image, the moment we all know, right? Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. Orville and Wilbur Wright finally conquering the sky. It's one of the most iconic photographs in all of American history. It's become this powerful symbol of ingenuity and just pure perseverance. But here's the thing. That original 1903 Wright flyer, it wasn't proudly displayed in America for decades. Nope, it was sent into exile thousands of miles away. And the reason why uncovers this incredible battle for credit that pitted two bicycle makers against one of the most powerful institutions in the entire country. Okay, Section 1, the race to the sky. To really understand this whole feud, we have to go back to the final, frantic days of the race itself. And it was a classic story, really, a true David versus Goliath. So on one side, you've got the full weight of the American scientific establishment. And on the other, you have two brothers, literally working out of a small bicycle shop. This was a real showdown between pedigree and persistence. So let's start with the Goliath in our story, Samuel P. Langley. I mean, this guy wasn't just some hobbyist. He was the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution itself. He had all the prestige, a brilliant mind, and a ton of government funding to build his flying machine, which he called the aerodrome. By all accounts, he was the odds-on favorite to win this thing. And then you have Orville and Wilbur Wright. They were the ultimate outsiders, just a couple of bicycle mechanics from Ohio funding their experiments with whatever profits they made from their shop. They had no formal credentials, no government grants, nothing like that. Just a super methodical, hands-on approach to solving the problem of flight. And it all came down to a matter of days. In late 1903, Langley was ready. But on December 8th, his second attempt was a huge public disaster. The aerodrome just plunged into the Potomac River, and his pilot nearly drowned. The press was absolutely merciless. And then, just 9 days later, with pretty much no one watching, the Wright brothers quietly made history. All right, Section 2, a feud for first flight. Now, you'd think that would be the end of the story, right? But the real fight, the one that would eventually send the flyer into exile, it didn't happen before the flight. It all happened years later, and it was fueled by the Smithsonian's burning desire to save its own reputation. You see, after Langley's death, the Smithsonian started pushing this new argument. They weren't claiming he had flown before the Wrights. No, instead, they argued that his machine was capable of it, and that it was just some bad luck on launch day that kept him from succeeding. It was a subtle difference, but it was a hugely important distinction that was basically designed to rewrite history. And here it is. This is the smoking gun. In 1914, the Smithsonian puts Langley's rebuilt aerodrome on display with this very label. It called it the first plane capable of flight. Now, to any visitor walking by, that wording totally implied that Langley had designed a successful plane before the Wrights ever even left the ground. Let's just break down how problematic this was. First off, the Smithsonian secretly made major modifications to the aerodrome to even get it to fly in their 1914 tests. Second, the guy they hired to fly it was in a bitter patent fight with the Wrights, a huge conflict of interest. And most importantly, this was a claim that Samuel Langley himself never, ever made while he was alive. So Orville Wright was, understandably, furious. He saw this as a direct attack on his and his brother's legacy. So in this incredible act of protest, he did something that was just unthinkable. He sent the most important artifact in aviation history to a museum in London. America's greatest invention was no longer in America. Section 3, the forgotten genius. And this is where our story takes a really fascinating turn. Because this entire feud, this whole battle for the title of first in flight, has completely overshadowed the man at the center of it all. It has flattened his incredible legacy into just a single public failure. So, let's ask a new question. If we just set aside the aerodrome for a minute, who really was Samuel Langley? Well, as it turns out, he was a scientific visionary whose work you almost certainly use every single day. Okay, so imagine this. Before the late 1800s, time was a total mess. Every town set its clocks by the sun, so noon in Pittsburgh was a few minutes different from noon in Philadelphia. For the booming railroad industry, this wasn't just messy, it was deadly. It caused catastrophic train collisions. Langley, who was then the director of the Allegheny Observatory, saw a problem and a huge opportunity. He used a telescope to calculate the exact time from the stars. Then, and this is the truly brilliant part, he sold that precise time as a subscription service, sending signals down telegraph lines to the railroads. He solved a national crisis and, at the same time, ingeniously funded his own scientific research. This system became the foundation for the standardized time zones that were adopted all across North America in 1883. So yeah, every single time you check your watch or your phone, you are using a system that Samuel Langley helped pioneer. But he didn't stop there. Langley was also fascinated by the sun. He invented this instrument called the bolometer. And get this, it was so sensitive it could detect the heat from a cow a quarter of a mile away. He used it to do something truly groundbreaking: measure the sun's energy output. He put it this way: since we are the children of the sun, it is a worthy problem to learn how things earthly depend upon it. He was literally asking if things like famine and crop prices could be connected to changes on the sun. He was studying the sun-climate connection more than a century before it became a major field of modern science. The man was decades ahead of his time. Okay, Section 4, a legacy restored. So, let's bring this all together. We've got this bitter feud, an exiled airplane, and the story of a forgotten genius. How in the world did it all get resolved? Well, modern science has now basically confirmed the very connections Langley was searching for. You see charts like this all the time now, showing a link between solar activity and climate periods like the Little Ice Age. It just proves his scientific curiosity was pointed in exactly the right direction. His questions are more relevant today than they have ever been. And what about the flyer? Well, that feud lasted for decades. But finally, in 1942, after a ton of pressure, the Smithsonian publicly published a full retraction. They gave the Wright sole credit for the invention of the airplane. And in 1948, just a year after Orville's death, the flyer finally came home. It was put on display in the very institution it had once defied. You know, the story of Samuel Langley is such a powerful reminder of how easily we simplify history. He's remembered for one very public failure, while his world-changing successes in timekeeping and astrophysics were almost completely forgotten. And that leaves us with a final, really crucial question. Is history the story of what actually happened, or is it the story that just gets told the loudest? The one shaped by pride, by powerful institutions, and by the passionate people fighting for their place in it. It really makes you wonder what other stories are just waiting to be rediscovered.